Do you remember those cigarette brands? The ones that once felt woven into being American? They filled TV screens, coat pockets, and long drives, symbols of pride and effortless cool before the world moved on. When did something so ordinary become a memory of who we were? Lucky Strike was more than a cigarette. It was a symbol of America's grit. In the pre-filtered era, Lucky Strike's signature phrase, "It's toasted," told the country that this was no ordinary smoke. It was a badge of toughness, a cigarette that carried the scent of factories, army barracks, and victory parades. During World War II, the brand became inseparable from the image of the American soldier. Every ration kit seemed to carry that familiar green or later white pack. Smoking one meant something. It meant you were part of a nation that worked hard and fought harder. Even the advertising knew it, painting Lucky Strike as a mark of resilience in the face of uncertainty. Families back home would save the empty packs, tiny reminders of fathers and brothers far away and of a time when every puff seemed patriotic. When the war ended, it still held that same energy, part pride, part nostalgia. But by the 1960s, as filters took over, its once loyal followers began to fade away. Still, if you ever catch that faint roasted tobacco scent, something inside remembers the taste of victory and of America when it was rough, proud, and unapologetically alive. Camel cigarettes were once the rebel's choice, the smoke that carried dust from battlefields and barrooms alike. Before flashy mascots and the cartoon camel that came later, Camels were known for their rich Turkish blend and for being the cigarette of soldiers and wanderers. Lighting one was like lighting a match to memory, the sound of jazz halls, the rumble of engines, and the murmur of late-night diners. They had a bite to them, a boldness that matched the swagger of the generation that built post-war America. Men would roll the soft pack in their shirt sleeves, a small rebellion against neatness and order. The scent lingered on leather jackets and steering wheels, symbols of a life lived on the move. And when advertising turned Camels into a cultural phenomenon, the cigarette became as American as the open road itself. But time caught up with the brand. As the world changed and attitudes hardened, Camel lost the mystery it once had. Today, the name remains, but the soul of that original Turkish blend belongs to another age. An age when smoke curled through every diner booth and every dream of freedom had the flavor of tobacco. Winston cigarettes once ruled America's airwaves. Their jingle, "Winston tastes good like a cigarette should," was everywhere, from the kitchen radio to the living room television. In a world before streaming and cell phones, those words stitched themselves into the daily rhythm of life. People sang along without even thinking, their hands tapping the steering wheel as they drove through snow-covered streets. The red and white pack wasn't just a brand. It was a sign of good taste, of normalcy, of home. Housewives bought them for their husbands. Truck drivers smoked them on long hauls, and television stars made sure you remembered the name. Winston was dependable, strong, and unmistakably American. It was the cigarette that powered lunch breaks, poker nights, and backyard barbecues. But as the decades rolled on and health warnings grew louder, the bright jingle turned quiet. Its cheerful tone faded, replaced by silence and nostalgia. Still, for those who remember, Winston's tune lives somewhere deep in the back of the mind, an echo of a time when America believed a good cigarette could taste like satisfaction itself. Chesterfield cigarettes had a charm all their own, half Hollywood glamour, half everyday habit. They were the cigarette of stars like Frank Sinatra and Lucille Ball, but also of ordinary Americans with lunch pails and work boots. Opening a pack felt like entering a small, elegant world of sophistication without pretense. There was something inviting about the name, something friendly, almost old-fashioned. People lit a Chesterfield while tuning in to their favorite radio show or between dances at a smoky nightclub. Even movie icons smoked them on screen, their gestures slow and deliberate, like part of a bigger story America was telling about itself. The cigarette had a clean draw, a balanced flavor, and a promise of style that anyone could afford. Its slogan, "They satisfy," wasn't just a line, it was a truth for millions. But time, as always, moved on. Filters came, tastes changed, and Chesterfield slipped quietly into memory. Yet for those who remember, its soft-pack design and quiet confidence still whisper of a time when even something as simple as lighting a cigarette could make you feel like you belonged to a beautiful, fleeting world. Pall Mall stood for elegance in a world that was anything but. Those tall orange packs felt like something imported, refined and cultured, even though they were born right here in America. Before filters became standard, Pall Mall was what you smoked when you wanted something smoother, longer, and just a little classier than the rest. It was the cigarette of quiet readers, thoughtful smokers, and city dwellers who liked their tobacco with a touch of sophistication. The ads spoke softly but confidently, promising a gentleman's smoke in an age when most brands shouted for attention. Its name itself, Pall Mall, rolled off the tongue like a secret password to refinement. The deep aroma of unfiltered tobacco filled jazz clubs, train stations, and parlor rooms alike. It wasn't for everyone, and that was the point. It made you feel a little more grown up, a little more important. By the 1970s, it began to lose its foothold to trendier, filtered competitors, but its legacy lingered. Pall Mall was the cigarette that reminded America that class wasn't about money, it was about taste. Tareyton was bold, defiant, and unforgettable. In the 1960s, their ads shouted, "I'd rather fight than switch," showing glamorous men and women with black eyes and cigarettes in hand. It was shocking, clever, and iconic, a brand that turned loyalty into attitude. For smokers, it meant standing by what you loved, even when trends changed. Tareyton wasn't about conformity, it was about pride in your choice. In an era of revolutions and protests, that message hit home, making the cigarette part of America's cultural rebellion. The smoke was strong, smooth, and rich, the kind that felt earned rather than bought. Tareyton smokers saw themselves as individuals, not followers. But like all things tied to a moment in time, its boldness couldn't last forever. Filters improved, campaigns softened, and the brand faded into history. Still, the image of those confident faces, bruised but smiling, remains burned into memory, a symbol of an America that once loved to fight for what it believed in, even if it was just a pack of cigarettes. Cool was more than a cigarette. It was a vibe. Long before corporate rebrands and sleek packaging, Cool was the taste of menthol perfection, crisp and cold with every draw. Its penguin mascot smiled from billboards and print ads, a symbol of smoothness in a smoky world. Cool meant something different. It was the cigarette of coolness, rhythm, and ease. Jazz musicians smoked it backstage. Office workers savored it during breaks. That icy rush was more than flavor. It was freedom from the heavy, earthy tobacco everyone else was offering. When you smoked a Cool, you didn't just take a drag. You exhaled attitude. It was green, refreshing, and unapologetically modern. But like everything too unique, its originality was eventually buried beneath corporate tinkering and changing trends. Still, the name lives on like a whisper of mint in the memory, a reminder of when being cool wasn't about image, but about feeling that chill of confidence deep in your chest. Salem brought the forest to your fingertips. As America's first menthol-filtered cigarette, it promised freshness unlike anything before it. The green pack stood out instantly, and its commercials painted vivid pictures of waterfalls, mountaintops, and crisp mountain air. People didn't just smoke Salem. They imagined themselves stepping into the ads, feeling that cold breeze through their hair. Its menthol hit was smooth, refreshing, and surprisingly gentle, perfect for people who wanted a lighter escape. The brand became synonymous with calm sophistication, the kind of cigarette you smoked while driving with the windows down or walking through snow-covered streets. Salem's imagery defined a generation of menthol smokers, turning the act itself into an experience. Even as new competitors rose, few could match the brand's sense of purity. It wasn't loud and it wasn't flashy. It was fresh, clean, and confident. Salem was the cigarette of people who believed the world could still feel new with every breath, even if just for a moment. Kent was born from science, not smoke and mirrors. Introduced in the post-war optimism of the 1950s, it came with something revolutionary: the micronite filter. Advertised as the safest cigarette, it promised a modern, intelligent way to enjoy tobacco. In an age obsessed with progress, Kent fit perfectly. It was the cigarette of engineers, thinkers, and suburban professionals who wanted sophistication without guilt. Holding that white and blue pack made you feel like you were part of the future, refined, responsible, and still just a little rebellious. For a while, it worked. The clean design and futuristic filter gave Kent an edge that made it a national favorite. But as decades passed and science caught up with marketing, the promise of safe smoking began to crack. Its once proud micronite filter became a cautionary tale, and Kent slipped quietly into memory. Yet, for those who lived through its heyday, it still represents a strange mix of innocence and innovation, a time when America believed technology could make even a cigarette seem pure. L&M was the cigarette of confidence, the filtered revolution that captured post-war America's imagination. Its slogan, "Just what the doctor ordered," rang with the kind of irony only time could reveal. Back then, it wasn't a joke. It was reassurance. The white pack with bold red letters looked clean, precise, and modern. People trusted it. It was the brand for anyone wanting a smoother smoke without losing that tobacco bite. The television ads made it sound healthy, almost patriotic, like progress itself came with a filter. L&M defined an era when Americans still believed in what they were sold, and marketing was an art form. Smokers lit up in diners, on trains, and during long road trips, the logo glowing faintly between fingers. The cigarette's rise was quick, its fall inevitable. But its spirit, bold, modern, and confident, remains the perfect snapshot of mid-century America when the future looked bright and a filtered cigarette really did feel like the next big thing. Viceroy was the cigarette for thinkers. Its tagline, "The Thinking Man's Cigarette," wasn't just clever marketing. It captured the post-war mindset of Americans who saw smoking as an act of calm reflection. Lighting a Viceroy meant you were taking a moment to think, to measure the world before acting. The cigarette itself looked refined, its white paper clean, its flavor smooth but confident. In the 1950s, that meant something. This was the decade of tailored suits, chrome cars, and quiet self-assurance, and Viceroy fit neatly into that picture. It wasn't loud or rebellious. It was deliberate. Businessmen smoked them between meetings, writers drew long drags over typewriters, and everyday workers savored them as small symbols of control in a changing world. The ads showed men and women who looked like they belonged in magazine covers, strong, intelligent, and composed. It was a cigarette that appealed to logic, to reason, even as the act itself was emotional and habitual. By the 1960s, filters became the norm, and Viceroy's tone of quiet confidence began to feel old-fashioned. Yet for a time, it represented something that Americans valued deeply: the idea that thoughtfulness and style could share the same space. When people remember Viceroy, they remember stillness, the soft sound of a match, the slow inhale, the pause that meant the world was waiting for you to decide what came next. Old Gold was the cigarette of optimism, born in the golden glow of pre-war America. With its shining yellow pack and the slogan, "Not a cough in a carload," Old Gold sold not just tobacco, but happiness, health, and humor. It was lighthearted, playful, and full of the confidence of the 1930s. Its ads featured dancers, pin-up girls, and bright smiles, wrapping cigarettes in the language of fun rather than vice. The brand understood what people needed: a break from worry, a taste of joy in the midst of a turbulent world. During the 1940s, its golden packaging gleamed in soldiers' hands, small tokens of normal life in faraway lands. When the war ended, Old Gold came home with them, becoming part of the boom years when everything felt possible. Housewives bought them for their husbands, and Hollywood stars lit them up on camera, giving the brand an aura of effortless charm. The taste was rich but mellow, like a good joke told after dinner, smooth, familiar, and comforting. By the 1960s, Its golden age had faded, outshined by new rivals, but its legacy endured in every ad that made smoking look bright instead of brooding. Old Gold was a symbol of sunshine in a pack, proof that for a while America really did believe every puff could taste like happiness. Raleigh was a cigarette that turned loyalty into a lifestyle. In an era when every brand was fighting for your attention, Raleigh rewarded you for staying true. Each pack came with coupons printed on the inside flap. Small paper tickets that could eventually be traded for toasters, lamps, or kitchenware. It was genius marketing, but also something more, a reflection of mid-century America's faith in hard work and reward. Housewives collected them meticulously, storing stacks of coupons in drawers beside the family ledger, dreaming of the day they could send them in for something real. Fathers joked that their smoking habit was for the family, and in a strange way, it was. Raleigh turned consumption into contribution, turning each puff into points and each point into proof of loyalty. Even the name felt traditional, rooted, dependable, like a brand that had been around forever. The cigarettes themselves were mild and balanced, pleasant without being flashy, the kind of smoke that fit any day and any mood. For many Americans, Raleigh was less about indulgence and more about belonging to something steady, something earned. It wasn't just a brand, it was a companion through the small routines of daily life. Those coupon books may be long gone, but for the people who saved them, Raleigh will always represent a time when patience and devotion actually paid off. Lark arrived with a burst of modern energy. Sleek, red, and futuristic, it stood out from the old guard brands that lined every corner store. Its claim to fame was its charcoal filter, marketed as a breakthrough for smoother, cleaner smoking. In the atomic age of the late 1950s and early 1960s, that promise meant everything. Americans were obsessed with technology, and Lark capitalized on that fascination perfectly. The cigarette's design looked space-age, from its bold red packaging to its circular filter design. Ad men pitched it as the future of flavor, the modern man's choice in a world that was rocketing toward tomorrow. The commercials had energy, hip, jazzy, filled with confidence. It was the brand for people who liked progress, who wanted the newest, smartest thing on the market. And for a while, it worked. Lark found its place among trendsetters, scientists, and suburban dreamers alike. Its flavor was crisp and its smoke velvety, giving smokers the illusion of innovation in every puff. But time, as it always does, turned invention into nostalgia. Today, Lark feels like a relic of a time when every new idea, no matter how small, could change the world. It wasn't just a cigarette. It was the feeling of stepping into the future, one drag at a time. Vantage was the cigarette of the 1970s, the decade when America finally started questioning itself. With its unique recessed filter and clean geometric packaging, it promised something lighter, safer, and smarter. In a world waking up to health warnings, Vantage offered reassurance wrapped in design. Its look was minimalist, almost medical, with a blue and white color scheme that made it feel more like a product of science than smoke. The recessed filter wasn't just a gimmick, it gave smokers a sense of control, of moderation in an age of excess. The ads spoke in calm tones, confident but not cocky, positioning Vantage as the cigarette for people who still enjoyed smoking but wanted to feel responsible about it. For the health-conscious smoker, it was progress in a pack. Its flavor was mild but distinctive, smooth yet satisfying. In every puff, there was a quiet promise that maybe you didn't have to give up what you loved to live a little longer. Of course, the illusion didn't last, but for a brief moment, Vantage captured the tension of the time, the tug-of-war between pleasure and caution, desire and reason. It was the sound of the 1970s in cigarette form, sleek, uncertain, and trying to find balance in a changing world. Parliament was smoking's high society. With its recessed filter and crisp white packaging, it was the cigarette of polished shoes, late-night jazz clubs, and city lights reflected on wet pavement. You didn't smoke a Parliament because you had to. You smoked it because you could. It carried a quiet air of prestige, a statement that you belonged somewhere above the noise. The ads didn't shout. They whispered sophistication. From Manhattan boardrooms to Beverly Hills cocktail parties, a parliament between two fingers said more than words ever could. Even its unique filter felt different, a tiny gap between luxury and indulgence, symbolizing distance from the ordinary. The smoke itself was smooth and cool, refined in a way that made lesser brands feel crude. Through the 1960s and 1970s, it became a favorite among professionals, entertainers, and anyone chasing that perfect blend of elegance and edge. When someone lit a parliament, they weren't just taking a break, they were taking their time. Decades later, its name still carries weight, its blue logo etched into the collective memory of a more stylish, deliberate America. Parliament wasn't just a cigarette, it was a prop in the performance of confidence. Bel Air was the softer side of cool. Introduced as a menthol alternative to the bolder, more masculine Marlboro, it quickly found a home among suburban smokers looking for something fresh and refined. The green and white pack stood out on grocery store shelves, a promise of crispness and calm. Bel Air didn't shout, it soothed. Its menthol flavor was gentle, never harsh, the kind of cigarette you could enjoy on a quiet evening after dinner. In commercials, smiling couples strolled along beaches or through tree-lined neighborhoods, the cigarette a subtle companion to contentment. It became the cigarette of choice for young professionals, housewives, and anyone who wanted sophistication without the edge. In the 1960s, when the suburbs represented the good life, Bel Air fit right in. The name itself carried grace, rolling off the tongue like a breath of clean air. By the 1980s, it had faded from the spotlight, replaced by louder brands and bolder trends. But its memory lingers, soft as its smoke. A snapshot of mid-century optimism when life felt steady, homes were new, and a simple menthol cigarette could make you feel like everything was exactly as it should be. Silva Thins were cigarettes that looked like fashion accessories. Slim, elegant, and impeccably designed, they belonged in the hands of the mod generation, the young, stylish crowd that treated smoking like an art form. These weren't cigarettes for factory workers or cowboys. They were for city girls in miniskirts and men in narrow ties and tailored suits. Everything about Silva Thins was intentional. The name was sleek, the packaging minimalist, the cigarettes themselves impossibly slim. Ads featured women posed like models, their cigarettes as much part of the outfit as their eyeliner or pearls. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, it became the brand of choice for those who wanted to be seen as sophisticated without being old-fashioned. Smoking Silva Thins wasn't about addiction. It was about identity. The flavor was light, the draw smooth, and the feeling distinctly urbane. They captured a moment when smoking and style were intertwined, when every exhale could feel like a photograph from a magazine. By the time smoking lost its cultural sheen, Silva Thins disappeared too. But their legacy lives in every glossy ad and every image of an era when beauty and rebellion shared the same breath. More cigarettes were unlike anything else on the shelf, long, slender, and deep brown like a fashion statement in smoke. Marketed toward women in the 1970s, they embraced style, sophistication, and confidence in a way few products dared to. The tagline, "More of what you're looking for," said it all. It wasn't just about length, but about attitude. They looked luxurious, almost European, and holding one felt elegant, even daring. Women in commercials wore wide-brimmed hats, turtlenecks, and knowing smiles. The cigarette became an accessory for the modern woman, independent, expressive, and unapologetically in control. The brown paper gave it a refined look, and its slow, even burn made it perfect for long conversations over wine or late-night reflection. More cigarettes weren't about rebellion. They were about poise. In a decade of shifting gender roles, it offered women something new, power wrapped in style. The ads didn't sell escape, they sold identity. And though the brand eventually faded, the image endures. A single elegant hand, a soft trail of smoke, and the quiet power of someone who knew exactly who she was. True cigarettes arrived in the 1970s with a promise that felt almost revolutionary. Low tar, more taste. It was the dawn of the health-conscious smoker, and True marketed itself as the honest choice. The blue and white packaging looked clean and almost medical, a design that suggested purity in a market full of indulgence. True wasn't glamorous, it was sincere. The ads showed real people, office workers, teachers, and everyday Americans who wanted to smoke responsibly. It was the cigarette for those caught between habit and conscience, between pleasure and progress. The taste was light, the draw easy, and the message simple. You could still enjoy smoking without feeling guilty. For a time, it worked. True became the go-to brand for those who wanted to appear thoughtful, aware, even modern. It reflected a changing America, one trying to balance its desires with its growing awareness of consequence. But eventually, even True couldn't outrun the truth. Still, it remains a symbol of a hopeful moment, when people believed that innovation could redeem even the most human of vices, and that honesty in both name and design could still sell a dream. Viceroy Menthol 120s were as much a fashion statement as they were a cigarette. Long, slim, and elegant, they stretched between the fingers like a piece of jewelry, a prop of sophistication that matched the sleek lines of 1970s femininity. The menthol flavor was crisp, cool, and clean, designed to pair perfectly with the era's obsession with glamour and poise. The packaging said it all: white and icy green, refined and understated, a whisper rather than a shout. Women who smoked Viceroy Menthol 120s weren't trying to blend in, they were expressing something. The longer cigarette length felt graceful, deliberate, and even a little theatrical. In nightclubs and department stores, the faint shimmer of smoke from one of these slender cigarettes carried a quiet confidence. This was not the brand of rebellion. It was the brand of control, of elegance without apology. Even its advertisements leaned into that message, with models posed against soft pastel backdrops, smiling as though they knew a secret the rest of the world had yet to learn. But beauty is fleeting, and as the 1980s dawned, the culture of cigarette glamour began to lose its shine. Health warnings grew louder, and the mystique of the long menthol faded into nostalgia. Yet, in every old photograph where a woman holds one with that effortless grace, you can still see what Viceroy Menthol 120s represented, a time when sophistication came in slim white paper, and coolness was measured not in rebellion, but in restraint. Tempo was the cigarette that tried to save the habit from itself. Introduced in the early 1970s as a low-nicotine experiment, it promised a new kind of smoking, cleaner, lighter, and somehow less guilty. The name said it all. Tempo was about rhythm, about slowing down in a world that was speeding up. The ads showed calm faces, open skies, and people who looked more like joggers than smokers. It was the beginning of a strange new idea, that a cigarette could be modern, healthy, even virtuous. For a brief moment, it worked. Tempo sold not just a product, but a philosophy. Smoke smarter, not harder. Its paper was thinner, its taste subdued, and its image sterile compared to the rich nostalgia of brands like Camel or Lucky Strike. It reflected the changing times. America was moving toward fitness, organic food, and self-improvement. Tempo tried to adapt, to fit into a world where smoking had to justify itself. But the irony was cruel. Its attempt to make smoking safe was what made it obsolete. Smokers found it bland. Non-smokers weren't buying the illusion. By the end of the decade, Tempo was gone, a ghost of the moment when the industry blinked and realized the end was coming. Today, it stands as a time capsule of denial, a brand born at the exact moment the smoke began to clear. Doral was the people's cigarette. It didn't need glamour or high-end advertising. It thrived on honesty and value. In the 1970s and 1980s, Doral became the quiet favorite of working-class America, the kind of brand you'd find in toolboxes, glove compartments, and corner diners. The slogan, taste me," was playful and plain-spoken, echoing the no-nonsense attitude of its loyal smokers. Doral wasn't about image, it was about consistency. Its flavor was strong but not harsh, and its price made it a lifeline for people who didn't care about prestige, only reliability. Factory workers smoked it on lunch breaks, truckers on long hauls, waitresses behind kitchens on 5-minute breathers. It became a social equalizer, the cigarette that didn't pretend to be anything more than it was. Where other brands sold fantasy, Doral sold familiarity. You didn't have to dress up to smoke it. You just had to show up. It represented a kind of American authenticity that's rare today, the quiet dignity of those who built, fixed, and carried the country forward. When it finally disappeared from store shelves, it wasn't with fanfare but with a sigh. Its departure marked the end of an era when cigarettes were about simple comfort, not performance or image. For those who remember Doral, lighting one up was less about escape and more about belonging to a time, a place, and a people who took pride in the ordinary. Player's Navy Cut was a relic of two worlds, the British Empire and American grit. With its sailor emblem and coiled rope design, it carried the scent of salt air, oil lamps, and sea voyages. Before it crossed the Atlantic, it was the cigarette of sailors and dock workers, a companion for the lonely and the brave. When it reached American shores, it found kindred spirits among veterans and laborers who understood its story without needing the accent. Its box art alone told a story, a tribute to courage and endurance. In a time before television glamour, Player's Navy Cut was the working man's quiet reminder of the sea that once tied the old world to the new. American servicemen took to it easily. It was rugged, dependable, and a little exotic. By the time the 1960s arrived, it had become something of a collector's treasure, fading from the mainstream but cherished by those who remembered. Even decades later, seeing that sailor's face can stir the same feeling of strength and nostalgia, a whisper of waves and the steady hum of ships returning home. Player's Navy Cut didn't just sell tobacco. It sold history, pressed neatly into a pack. Bull Durham was where American smoking began. Before factories, filters, or jingles, there were pouches of hand-rolled tobacco stamped with the name of a bull. It was more than a brand. It was a ritual, a part of daily life for farmers, cowboys, soldiers, and anyone who built their days from the ground up. The tobacco came rough and ready, its scent deep and earthy, meant to be rolled by hand into paper or packed into a pipe. Rolling your own was a small act of freedom. Each cigarette was personal, earned through effort and patience. It was smoking stripped down to its essence, a slow, deliberate craft that fit perfectly into the rhythm of frontier living. Bull Durham was everywhere, from general stores to army camps, its bright yellow label a mark of American grit. During the Great Depression, a pouch of Bull Durham was often worth more than its cost. It gave comfort, familiarity, and control in uncertain times. When machine-made cigarettes finally took over, Bull Durham lingered, a stubborn reminder of when work and tobacco went hand in hand. Its legacy is raw, honest, and unmistakably American. A brand that never needed polish because it already had pride. Lighting one wasn't just habit. It was heritage, rolled tight between your fingers, glowing with the spirit of the people who built a country out of dust and smoke. If these vanished cigarette brands stirred up a few memories of smoke-filled diners, jukebox nights, or long drives under neon lights, candy cigarettes marketed to kids showed just how differently the 1970s viewed smoking culture. These chalky, sweet sticks came in boxes that looked exactly like real cigarette packs, complete with brand names and logos. Some even had powdered sugar that puffed out like smoke when you blew on them. Kids mimicked adults by holding them between fingers, lighting them, and pretending to smoke. Parents laughed and took photos, never thinking twice about the message it sent. Playgrounds often turned into smoking lounges, with kids showing off fake packs as if they were grown-ups. Some even argued about which brand tasted better, copying conversations they had overheard from parents. Candy shops displayed them proudly, treating them as just another treat. They were sold right alongside candy bars at every corner store, making them irresistible to children. It was not until much later that society realized how inappropriate it was to encourage kids to play with fake cigarettes. Today, the idea of marketing a candy that mimics smoking seems outrageous, but back then, it was just another example of how normalized smoking was in daily life. In the 1980s, the sight of first graders walking to school alone was unremarkable. Entire groups of children, barely 6 or 7 years old, marched down sidewalks with backpacks bouncing, chatting, and laughing without a single adult in sight. It was a matter of practicality. Parents worked early shifts, buses did not always cover every street, and walking was the simplest solution. Crossing busy roads with no crossing guard was considered part of growing up. Children learned independence with every step, even when it meant braving rain or snow. Strangers waved as kids passed, shop owners looked out from storefronts, and neighbors trusted the community to keep watch. Parents did not worry about constant supervision the way they do today. By the time children reached 4th grade, walking alone was practically expected. Now, letting a 6-year-old walk a few blocks alone can lead to intervention from authorities. Looking back, it is amazing how normal it once was to see children managing themselves in the big world. Do you remember the pride of making it to school on your own 2 feet? Mercury thermometers were a household staple, used on babies, adults, even pets. Tucked in bathroom drawers or first aid kits, they were slim, silver, and dangerously beautiful. If you were sick, your mom would shake the thermometer to reset the mercury, then slide it under your tongue or arm. You waited in silence, watching the silvery liquid rise and hold its place. Nobody questioned it. It was science. It was routine. But those thermometers were filled with mercury, a potent neurotoxin that could poison the air if the glass broke, and they often did. A slip from the counter or a hard shake could send beads of mercury rolling across the floor like tiny balls of doom. Most families wiped them up with tissues or brooms, unaware of the harm. Today, mercury thermometers have been almost entirely phased out, replaced by digital ones that beep instead of shimmer. But for kids of the 80s, that little glass stick was part of every fever, every flu, every call to grandma for what to do next. And just like nobody questioned the mercury, nobody questioned mixing alcohol with open water, especially when summer meant floating down a river without a care in the world. Playgrounds in the 1980s were built less for safety and more for durability. Swings, monkey bars, seesaws, and towering metal slides stood proudly on surfaces paved with asphalt or concrete. If a child fell, and they often did, the impact was hard and unforgiving. Metal slides scorched bare legs in the summer sun, and merry-go-rounds spun so fast they sent kids flying. Monkey bars stretched high, daring children to climb higher than they should. Cuts, bruises, and even broken bones were part of the package, and kids wore them like badges of honor. Parents rarely intervened. A scraped knee was rinsed with a hose, and kids went right back to climbing. Teachers supervising recess barely blinked at children tumbling onto blacktop. Today, playgrounds are built with padded surfaces, rubber mulch, and strict regulations. Looking back, it is astonishing to think how casually kids once played inches above concrete. Do you remember hitting the asphalt, shaking it off, and running back to the swings without a second thought? Cars without seatbelts for everyone were the norm in the 1970s. Many vehicles only had lap belts in the front seats, while back seats often had no restraints at all. Children piled into station wagons, sitting on the floor, in trunks, or even stretched out across the back bench seat. Families went on road trips with kids rolling around freely, playing games, or lying down for naps. Some kids even rode with their heads sticking out of windows or sat facing backward, waving at drivers behind them. Others built pillow forts in the back during long drives, completely unbuckled. It was a mix of chaos and freedom that defined family car travel. Parents did not worry about safety harnesses or buckles because the expectation simply was not there. Seatbelts were considered optional at best, and many drivers tucked them behind seats so they would not wrinkle clothes. Campaigns like "Buckle Up for Safety" had only just begun, and it would be decades before seatbelt laws became standard nationwide. Looking back, the thought of driving at highway speeds with an entire family unrestrained is terrifying, but at the time it was just how things were done. Hitchhiking was once seen as adventurous, not reckless. People stuck out their thumbs with a smile and a sign, hoping for a ride and maybe a story. Soldiers on leave, college students on break, wanderers with a dream. They all relied on the kindness of strangers. Roads were filled with possibilities, and nobody thought twice about pulling over. You might remember watching someone hop into a stranger's car and wave goodbye, trusting the road and the driver. It was how many got from one town to the next, especially before cheap bus fares and ride-sharing apps. Parents might warn you to be careful, but that was the extent of the worry. Hitchhiking was not illegal in most places. It was resourceful. Over time, though, stories of assaults, disappearances, and crimes changed the narrative. Laws tightened. Signs went up, "No hitchhiking." Now, in many states, it is restricted or outright banned. The open road closed itself off. Hitchhiking became a symbol of risk rather than freedom. But for those who once stuck out their thumb and caught a ride with a stranger, it still lives in memory as a gesture of trust. And just as strangers were trusted, so were quiet children waiting patiently in cars, alone. Imagine a time when the centerpiece of every living room was a bulky, boxy behemoth, the CRT TV. Coming into prominence in the 1950s, this technological marvel turned the humble living room into a bustling family theater. Picture the excitement as families gathered around to watch the moon landing or the latest episode of I Love Lucy. Despite its hefty frame, the CRT TV was the window to the world until the sleek and slender flat screens of the early 2000s gently nudged it into the annals of history. Yet, ask any vintage video game enthusiast, and they'll wax poetic about the unmatched charm of playing on a CRT. Before streaming in HD, the CRT TV was the family's bond, the newsbringer, and the entertainer, all rolled into one. Gasoline-scented model airplane glue was the secret sauce of childhood creativity and accidental intoxication. The solvent-heavy adhesive smelled like a gas station in July, sharp enough to make your nose sting and your eyes water. Kids would crack open the tube, squeeze out a glob, and before you could say ventilation, they'd be glassy-eyed and dizzy. This wasn't your average school glue. It was packed with toluene and other solvents that evaporated quickly, creating fumes that went straight to the brain. And back then, no one batted an eye. Parents assumed the lightheadedness was from excitement. In reality, kids were unintentionally getting high. Some took it further and started sniffing glue on purpose, leading to a whole wave of accidental addiction. It became a national concern. Stores put warning labels on the tubes. Glue brands changed formulas, but the damage was already done. For a brief moment, model kits were less about airplanes and more about buzzing in the back of your brain. That sharp chemical tang became the background scent of many basements, garages, and bedrooms. It stuck to your fingers, your clothes, and your memory. And the toys? Well, they often stayed unfinished because the builder was too loopy to finish gluing on the wings. But if model glue seemed risky, just wait until you see the next toy that looked exactly like a real weapon, down to the shell ejection. In the 1980s, the idea of just a few beers before driving was shrugged off by many as no big deal. Bars often had crowded parking lots late at night, filled with cars whose drivers had been drinking most of the evening. Police might pull someone over if they were swerving badly, but casual drinking and driving was still socially tolerated in ways that feel shocking today. Back then, it was not uncommon for adults to finish up at a local tavern, slide behind the wheel, and head home without a second thought. Even small-town festivals often had beer tents with people drinking freely before hopping into their cars. The danger was always there, but the culture treated it as routine. Friends might joke about someone being fine to drive, even when they clearly were not. The truth is, accidents happened often, but the public's attitude was different. Campaigns against drunk driving were only starting to gain momentum, and the phrase "designated driver" was not yet part of everyday vocabulary. Today, even one drink can put you in legal jeopardy behind the wheel, but in the 1980s, it was still seen as normal. Looking back, it is unsettling to realize how casually people risked lives, chalking it up to part of the night out. Do you remember when "just a few" was the excuse everyone used? BB guns and pellet guns, treated as toys, reflected a time when safety concerns were far less strict. Kids received them as birthday presents or bought them with allowance money, then ran into backyards or fields to play wars without goggles or supervision. The guns looked real, fired small projectiles, and caused plenty of injuries, but that never slowed their popularity. Children lined up cans on fences, tested their aim on bottles, and sometimes even shot at each other in mock battles. Bruises, welts, and chipped windows were common, but few parents saw them as serious problems. Instead, BB guns were viewed as a training step before hunting or using real firearms. Parents often shrugged it off as part of childhood, seeing it as a step between toy cap guns and real hunting rifles. Children learned to aim, to shoot at cans or bottles, and unfortunately, sometimes at each other. It was dangerous, but it was also seen as normal, even character building. Today, strict regulations, bright safety markings, and bans on certain models make them far different from what they were. In the 1970s, though, BB guns were simply toys, symbols of a looser and riskier time. Home hair dryers in the 1960s looked like they came straight from a beauty salon, but without any of the safety checks. These early models had bulky hoods or handheld nozzles, often with thick cords that frayed faster than a worn shoelace. You'd plug them into the wall, perch near the bathroom sink, and hope for the best. No ground wires, no insulation. Just you, your wet hair, and a live current a sneeze away from disaster. The metal casing got hot. The motors sparked occasionally. And heaven help you if your fingers were damp. Water plus faulty wiring? That hairdo could turn into a fireworks show. Yet people trusted them because that sleek salon look felt worth the risk. Back then, it was just another day in the name of glamour. But if electricity was playing with fire, what we put directly on wounds wasn't much better, especially when it came in a bright red bottle with a mercury surprise. Step into a restaurant in the 1980s, and it would not take long for smoke to hit your face. Entire families sat at tables eating dinner while the next table over puffed away on cigarettes. Ashtrays sat on every surface, and the air was thick with haze that today would be unthinkable. It was not just restaurants. Parents smoked in cars with the windows rolled up while kids sat in the back seat, coughing quietly. Grocery stores had shoppers strolling down the aisles with a cigarette hanging from their lips as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Children often carried the smell of smoke in their hair and clothes no matter where they went. Health warnings were starting to appear, but they were drowned out by the cultural acceptance of smoking everywhere. Non-smokers had little choice but to breathe it in, whether they liked it or not. Smoking sections in restaurants existed, but they were often nothing more than a line of booths separating smokers from non-smokers, with smoke floating freely between them. Looking back, it is astonishing to think that families once tolerated meals eaten in a cloud of secondhand smoke. What was considered everyday life then is illegal in most places now. Do you remember when restaurants handed you an ashtray before they handed you a menu? Collecting and playing with lead-painted toys was not just common, it was colorful. Bright red fire trucks, yellow duck pull toys, green building blocks, all coated in lead-based paint that chipped with time and clung to tiny fingers. Kids chewed on them, babies teethed on them. Nobody thought twice. Lead paint made colors pop and finishes last. It was used in toy trains, doll houses, lunchboxes, and even cribs. But as scientists and doctors began linking lead exposure to cognitive delays, behavioral problems, and even organ damage, the danger became harder to ignore. Still, many households in the 1980s were filled with toys made before stricter regulations took hold. You might remember that sweet metallic taste from licking a painted truck or the smell of an old wooden toy chest. It was part of playtime, but under the surface, those bright colors came with a cost. Today, toy safety is rigorously tested, and lead limits are strictly enforced. But back then, the warnings were distant, the labels unclear, and the risks silent. And if the toys were risky, so were the neighborhood traditions, like launching fireworks right from your own backyard. No permits, no fire marshal, just matches and luck. Back in the 1970s, asbestos was the miracle material nobody questioned. It was fireproof, heatproof, durable, and completely packed into everyday items like ironing board pads. If you were ironing your Sunday best or pressing collars for school, chances are you were standing over a big square of asbestos without even knowing it. The logic back then was that if something could handle heat, it was good. And asbestos? It could handle just about anything, except your lungs. That stuff did not just stay in the pad. It crumbled, it flaked, it floated right up into the air and got breathed in over and over again. Still, no one thought twice. Moms would lean over the ironing board, kids running around, windows shut, and steam rising up like a sauna of danger. It was not until years later that we figured out those innocent little chores came with a free side of cancer risk. And speaking of leaving kids in questionable situations, sometimes they were not in the house at all. Sometimes they were left in the car, alone, with the windows rolled up. In the 1980s, airplanes had smoking sections. Passengers could light up mid-flight, filling a pressurized cabin with smoke while hundreds of strangers sat inches away. Ashtrays were built into every seat, and the smell lingered long after a flight landed. Families flew cross-country while sitting in rows divided only by a flimsy sign that said, "Smoking" and "Non-smoking." In reality, the smoke drifted everywhere, making the entire cabin smell like an ashtray. Flight attendants walked the aisles, serving coffee in one hand and collecting cigarette butts in the other. Health concerns were raised, but airlines continued to allow it, catering to the smoking culture of the time. Children coughed quietly. Non-smokers complained, but the majority accepted it as unavoidable. It was simply part of flying in the 1980s. Today, the thought of someone lighting a cigarette on a plane is absurd and illegal. Do you remember looking up through a haze of smoke while cruising at 30,000 feet? Leaving kids home alone as latchkey children was an accepted reality in the 1970s. Parents worked long hours, and childcare options were limited, so kids often came home from school to empty houses. They wore house keys around their necks, let themselves in, and made snacks until parents arrived later in the evening. Television became a babysitter, and frozen dinners filled the gap when kids cooked for themselves. It was not considered neglect, it was simply what families did to make ends meet. Communities trusted that children were responsible enough to handle it, and parents expected independence from a young age. Today, child welfare guidelines and laws would view this very differently, but at the time it was part of growing up. Being a latchkey kid carried a mix of pride and loneliness, teaching responsibility while also reminding kids how much times have changed. Halloween nights in the 1980s stretched on for hours. Kids wandered neighborhoods long after the streetlights flickered on, sometimes staying out until midnight. Parents rarely tagged along. Halloween was for children, and adults stayed home to hand out candy. Groups of kids walked miles away from home, crossing busy streets, climbing porch steps, and filling pillowcases with candy until they were too heavy to carry. Older kids pranked each other with shaving cream, toilet paper, and eggs, while younger ones ran from house to house without supervision. The darkness only added to the thrill. Strangers' houses were fair game. No one questioned whether the candy was safe, and no one checked in every hour by phone. Parents trusted kids to return when they were done, even if that meant after midnight. Today, trick-or-treating hours are often capped early in the evening, with parents following close behind and flashlights lighting the path. Looking back, the freedom was exhilarating, but the risks are hard to ignore. Do you remember dragging home a pillowcase so stuffed with candy it nearly ripped? Doctors prescribing amphetamines for dieting was shockingly normal in the 1950s. Known as pep pills, these stimulants were handed out to patients, especially women, as a quick fix for weight loss and fatigue. Pharmaceutical ads in popular magazines glamorized them as safe and effective, often showing slim, smiling women as proof of their power. Many general practitioners wrote prescriptions casually, with little thought for long-term consequences. For housewives juggling children, housework, and social expectations, the pills promised energy and appetite suppression. In an era obsessed with appearance and thinness, especially for women, the popularity of amphetamines skyrocketed. Few people realized the addictive qualities or the toll on physical and mental health. It was only later, when dependency and abuse became undeniable, that stricter regulations began to rein in their use. Today, prescribing amphetamines in such a casual way would be illegal and unthinkable. Yet in the 1950s, it was just another visit to the doctor's office where patients left with bottles of pills meant to boost their mood and shrink their waistline. Looking back, it feels unsettling that something now so tightly controlled was once marketed like a simple vitamin. This was a time when trust in medicine was high and the culture of quick fixes overshadowed caution. The legacy of those prescriptions still lingers, a reminder of how blind faith in convenience sometimes comes with hidden costs. Drinking and floating on rivers without life jackets was summer at its most carefree and most dangerous. You grabbed a giant black inner tube, packed a cooler full of beer, and drifted with your friends down slow-moving waters for hours. No one wore a life jacket, most could barely swim, but it was never about safety. It was about the sun, the music, and the freedom to float with no responsibilities. Some tied their tubes together. Others threw a rope to a canoe hauling more drinks. The river became a party, and the risks were part of the fun. You might remember falling out and laughing, feet searching for the rocky bottom, arms flailing before someone pulled you back in. Today, alcohol use while floating or boating is strictly monitored. Life jackets are required for anyone under a certain age in most states, and adults can face citations, or worse, for ignoring safety laws. But in the 1980s, there was no lecture, no patrol, just a lazy current and a long afternoon. And while the river taught you how to stay afloat, the classroom taught something entirely different, often with a wooden paddle. In the 1980s, sticking out your thumb on the side of the road was considered practical, not reckless. Hitchhiking was part of everyday life, especially for teens trying to get to the mall, workers without cars, or college students heading home for the weekend. Parents often reminded their kids to be careful, but they rarely forbade it. Back then, the culture trusted strangers more. A kid could hop into a passing car and be dropped off at school or a friend's house without much worry. Stories about hitchhiking dangers existed, but they felt distant, more like urban legends than reality. Most people saw it as a cheap, convenient way to get around. Drivers often viewed it as neighborly duty. Picking up a hitchhiker was framed as helping someone out, not risking your life. Teenagers even bragged about their hitchhiking adventures, treating it as a milestone of independence. Today, the idea of letting a child climb into a stranger's car is unthinkable. Laws, awareness campaigns, and tragic headlines ended the practice, replacing it with strict warnings. Looking back, it is chilling how normal it once was. Do you remember when a thumb outstretched on the roadside was all the transportation you needed? Selling cigarettes to teenagers in vending machines was shockingly normal. These machines were everywhere, in restaurants, bowling alleys, and even outside grocery stores. Teenagers could walk right up, drop in some quarters, pull a knob, and walk away with a pack of cigarettes. No identification was checked, and no one questioned whether the buyer was old enough. For many teenagers, buying from vending machines was their first brush with independence. Groups of kids hung around the machines, daring each other to buy packs just for the thrill. The glowing lights of the machines made them almost inviting, blending in with arcade games and soda dispensers. The machines became hangouts for kids who often bought cigarettes just because they could. For adults, it was a convenience, but for teenagers, it was a loophole that made smoking easy and accessible. Anti-smoking campaigns had not yet taken hold in the way they would in later decades, and the dangers of tobacco were still downplayed in popular culture. By today's standards, the idea of unsupervised teenagers buying cigarettes out of a vending machine feels absurd, but in the 1970s, it was just another part of everyday life. Because in 1969, Pan American Airlines launched a waiting list for commercial flights to the moon. No joke. People were lining up to get their names on this list. The idea was simple. We made it to the moon, so the next logical step was to sell tickets. Over 90,000 people signed up, excited about the idea of sipping martinis in zero gravity and watching the Earth rise outside their window. And Pan Am treated it like a real thing. They issued membership cards, called it the First Moon Flights Club, and promised that when the day came, they would call. The only problem? There was no plan, no actual timeline, no spaceship. It was a publicity stunt that spiraled out of control. People bought into the dream hard, and Pan Am was not about to correct them. When the company went bankrupt in the 1980s, it had never even started building anything to take people to space. The dream fizzled out, but it proved just how hungry the world was for a taste of the future. And nowhere was that hunger more obvious than in people's homes, where they tried to bring cinema magic to life with a machine the size of a small refrigerator. Share your story in the comments, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe so we can keep rekindling the memories America forgot to save.